Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be talking about user flows today. So what are user flows? I see this question thrown around a bunch and people always say they are working on them but never really present them at all. So what are they? Well, user flow is essentially a series of steps like we have illustrated over here. And it is a series of steps a user takes to achieve a meaningful goal. So why do we use them? Well, you may be thinking, are these wireframes? Are these like some part of our sketches? Well, they're used to communicate the intended flow of a user through various pages and actions in an app or website. So how do we make them? Well, your flow should include a name, steps, users, and a description of what happens at each step. So I really like this quote, but Ryan Singer from Basecamp created a great shorthand for user flows, and he actually calls them UI flows. It's basically what the user sees, and then what they do, and then the next step is what the user sees next and what they are going to do next. It's really simple. But ultimately, user flows are just another method that designers are going to use to define their product experience, websites, etc. But wait. It isn't just another method. It's not just like sitemaps, or it's not just the same as just sketching. They have the ability to define sections of something abstract or technical from the perspective of the user. The most important thing about user flows is that they outline the goal your user achieves by completing the flow. So here's an example. This is a very basic user flow. Step 1, a user goes to a welcome screen. Step 2, they use a social login, maybe. Step 3, and they get instant access to the product. That is as simple as it gets. So why do they help, you may be asking? Well, they are the best way to solve the issue of communicating the way we want our products to work and the way users interact with our products. They also help us think about our product and the users who interact with it in 3 simple questions. What is the goal of this thing? So we want them to register for the product in this example. Who is doing it? Well, a general user who is external from the product is doing this right now. And how do they do it? Well, they go to the welcome screen, they use a social login, and they get instant access to that product. Let's take a look at the process in a bit more detail. Before we begin, we need structure. We need foundation. Gone are the days of creating these massive user flows that are sprawling all over the place. And they really lead nowhere, and they're hard to, just comprehend if you're not the person who created them. So step 1 is, what is the purpose of your user flow? You really need to name your flow. It's as simple as that. Give it a name that describes its purpose. That is the goal the user achieves by completing the steps. And surprisingly, people often miss this. Step 2, right here. Despite popular belief, user flows go in one direction. You don't want to be going all over the place. Limit your decision points in each flow so you can avoid crazy huge sitemaps and huge prototypes. Yes, it's okay to have multiple decision points like what we see here, and multiple prototypes and a sitemap. We'll get into that later, but when we want to convey a distinct interaction, user flows work best. That's the big difference. And why is this the case? Well, they tell a story, and it's far easier for anyone to remember than a large product map or a series of cards in whatever tool you're using, like Jira or GitHub issues, etc. The third piece of the process is they represent a complete task. To ensure that your product is organized, the scope of each flow should be a single task or a goal for your user. You shouldn't be having massive user flows that have like 3 or 4 different endings. You really want to just hone in on like maybe 1 or 2. Maybe there's a successful and an unsuccessful path over here. And ultimately, that's going to be maybe something like you've applied for something and you didn't get accepted. So remember, keep those user flows concise. If they're too short, then you fail to tell a story. And if they're too long, then they lose their meaning. Remember, your user flows should be the clearest model of your product, and you can do that if you follow the rules I just laid out. Hey everyone, welcome back. I know I explained what user flows are, but I really want to get into some details about the things you should do and things that you shouldn't do. So let's start. User flows show the purpose of what you are trying to create. So don't do this. Don't be vague. Vague user flows and names hide potential complexity, and it really doesn't communicate enough information back to the viewer. Instead, let's move up over to here. Instead, you should use more descriptive names, like add user payment details in comparison to just profile or something like that. Organize them into also separate flows if you need to. If you have something that's a little bit more complex, by naming your flows, you're able to design from the user's perspective, and you can split goals based off of their goals. Another don't. Let's get over here. Okay, I see this a bunch, especially from junior designers. Your flows should always go in one direction, basically. Don't do this, where you have these flows that are sprawling. I mentioned this in the past, but confusing flow maps are the absolute worst. These work as a good sitemap or to show the way the navigation works in your product, but ultimately, these aren't essentially what a user flow is. Instead, you should do this. Split them into distinct flows and categorize. Let's move on to the next one. Here it is. Okay. A very important part of a user flow is its details. Don't do this. Don't add in useless information and don't miss the key information. We need to know the details the user needs to take to complete a task and the actions. Instead, let's take a look at a better example. This is what you should be doing. Add the right amount of detail outlining each step and goal. This way, anyone can read and understand your flow. So these are the do's and don'ts of creating user flows. If you follow them to a T, you should be good to go. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Before we start, I want to talk about what we are going to be building today. So we're going to be working on our own user flows. You'll have available assets over here in the assets page where you can use these different types of containers containing different types of like blocks of text, imagery. We have buttons and form elements and all that kind of stuff. So you'll have all this available to you to just use right out of the gate. I'll go into in a bit more detail on how to create some of these things really quickly, but that really shouldn't hold you up too much. The purpose really that we want to focus on is actually creating some really amazing user flows. So I'll be working on 3 different types, and these are the user flows that we're going to have at the end of our tutorial. And we are going to need a couple of things. So we'll have those assets and we're going to need a plugin. And that plugin over here is called Autoflow. Now you may be wondering, you can use these arrows that I've created, or you can go ahead and actually use that plugin called Autoflow. I'll make that link available for everyone, but this makes it really easy to just connect flows. So all you need to do to use Autoflow is hold or click on a device, click on another device while holding shift, and it's automatically going to create the arrow for you. So totally up to you what you want to do. If you want something a bit more like custom and different types of spacing, I mean, you have to go this route. But if you did want to create a user flow just really quickly, I would definitely suggest using this plugin. Super helpful, and it's going to come in handy in a lot of different areas in design. So let's get right into it and have some fun. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Before we actually jump into the fun stuff of creating our own user flows, I want to just talk about something that's really important here. When you are creating a bunch of user flows, you really want to be efficient and you want to speed up your workflow as much as possible. You don't want to be spending time and time on trying to get like a perfect box or making sure your user flows are like high fidelity, because they really don't need to be. They can be really simple. Now, in this page over here called assets, I have a bunch of different types of assets. And what these are, they kind of look like wireframe assets, to be honest. Now, the best thing we can actually do here is we need to think about all the different types of assets that we could possibly use, and we can keep it really simple. So what I've done is I've created a one column bunch of assets. So like just an image or image and, like text, and, there's like some subheading and a heading and all that kind of stuff. I also have a grid here as well, all using auto layout. It's really simple stuff. And I'll show you how to create a couple of these different things, but I've created like even 3-column products based off of our client and what we want to build. And I've also created just plain text pieces over here. Then we have some like inputs and buttons. If you have like forms that you want to use, I have like a primary and a secondary button. And that's all I basically have here. And I think you should do your best to also create something similar to this, so that way you have something always to reference and to use. So let's get into creating some of these little pieces. So you can do it any which way you want. I like to keep my things really neat, so I'm just going to make a copy over here. You have this file, so I encourage you all to follow along to take a look and see if you could recreate some of these pieces. I think maybe we can start with something like this. So basically, if we wanted to recreate this, what I've done is I have a frame here, which is like the device frame. And you can choose any size, or you can just go ahead and choose like the 13 Pro. I believe that's the size I'm using. What I've done here is I've just rounded the corners to just give it a nice little effect and put a nice faint stroke just on the outside. So I'm just going to add a stroke and add a color, and we're going to move rather quickly through this. And I am going to make that stroke dark so we can all see it, and it was set to the outside. Now you can create anything you like. You can create something that looks like mine. It doesn't have to. I'm just creating something really rough here, so just to walk you through that process. Now the other interesting thing here is I'm going to make this an auto layout frame, because I just want my content to like stack nicely. I don't want to have to worry about like laying out, to be honest. Like that's not my priority here. I just need it to be neater, and I can focus more so on writing the details. So what I do is I just created an auto layout frame. You can set the padding to whatever you like. I think 16 or something like 24 is probably the best. And then you can set the spacing. I like keeping everything to 16 is totally fine. Now for these little squares, what I did was I just created a square, and I used the rectangle tool, so you can go up here and get it, or you can just press R. So I'm going to use R, and it doesn't really matter for the size just yet. And I'm going to duplicate that by using the shortcut, which is Command D or Control D, and it's over here. We'll make this a little bit darker so that way we can see. So now we have two like blocks, and we can use things like this as like imagery, and we can group that into a frame, and we can just call this like images or whatever you want. Then you can set the spacing in auto layout, and we can just throw this frame right in. Whoops. So you can resize your device if you want. So that is basically how you can just make like images. And the same thing basically goes for these little like text layers. All I've done is I've made these little rectangles and put them in a auto layout frame, as you can see. So if you're confused as to like, oh, well, how did you make something like that? Just always look at the actual layers in here and break them down. This is an auto layout frame. You don't actually need this one, so I could actually remove it and it still functions the same. You can just adjust the width here instead of setting it to like fill the container like this. And you can also set like some paragraph text if you want to have like the effect of having long text. So there's a bunch of things you can do like that. For buttons, I essentially just created like the same thing. I have another rectangle. I just gave it like a fixed height of something. And, you know, you have like a black version for like a primary, and then, you know, you create another duplicate of that, and we'll have a secondary. So maybe like if you have like a cancel and save button or something like that. So you can go ahead and create different types of assets like that. And I really do encourage you to do your best to, you know, name those assets. Right now, I'm not being the best over here. I just call it rectangle. But if you look at the assets that you have available to you, I have like primary button laid out. And I think this is the first step into understanding how you could be way more efficient with your workflow. Now, that is all you're really going to need to know to get started here. And I wouldn't worry too much about like creating components just yet or anything like that. I would use some of these assets and just start throwing them inside these devices. You'll notice that they are fixed width and a fixed height. So you can set these to fill the container and not really worried about, you know, how the container reacts. And yeah, that's basically it. These are going to be some useful assets for you. Hey everyone, and welcome back. I want to talk about user flows, and more specifically, I want to talk about the one user flow that is registering for the product, because it's very important for something like this. Now, if you have images of your sketches or other types of resources that you think are going to help you, you can bring those images right into Figma easily by just going over here and by placing the image. And that's the shortcut for Mac users, and you'll see it there for Windows users as well. So that's an easy way, or you can copy and paste that image directly from a website. You can copy and paste it from another file. But so I have all my assets here. I have even like a title asset and a details asset and a device asset additionally to what we have here. I'm going to create a large frame by pressing F. And I'm just going to bring that over there. So I'm going to rename this one just generally just onboarding. Then I'm going to place my title in there. Doesn't really matter. I'm being, you know, a little messy, and that's okay. Now the title of this flow it's one of the most important things. I think it should be like registering for our product. So let's type that in. Okay. And let's bring in our device and our details frame. So I'm holding shift while I'm selecting both and just dragging them directly in the frame. And you can see that pop up over here in the layers panel. I also have an arrow here, so we can keep that trusty arrow. Okay, so this is going to be our step one. And when I think about just the first step of registering for a product, I am going to start typing before I actually start designing just yet, like just placing things within this device. But the first thing I think about is like the user arrives at our welcome screen and notices a button to proceed forward to registration. Perfect. I mean, I think we should probably have like a little thing here that says this step is skippable, or the user can skip this step. Okay, so I'm just gonna increase the frame. So I'm gonna hold down Command or Control and just bring that up here, so that way we have a lot of space. The one thing I want to stress here is that, you know, the first thing somebody sees when they come into the website or the product is that they are essentially, you know, they are going to see like a welcome screen of some sort. So I duplicated this and brought it into here. You can just like copy and paste it as well. So I'll just grab a button here, like a primary. I'm gonna copy that and click my frame and paste it. And there we go. I mean, you can also go ahead and I like to use colors sometimes because I think it helps just show you, what are the interactive states? Like, do they click this and then do they click something else? So I think this is just going to suffice as like some sort of welcome screen. Then we're going to move over to the next screen. So you can see you can start building these out rather quickly just by thinking, even in your head. I would actually sketch these out first and think about every single flow you have and which ones are really important for the success of your product. Like, you don't need to do like a normal login flow. I mean, you could, it would take you probably like 5 minutes, but I think that kind of design pattern is pretty normalized. When you're thinking about things that are much more custom, like this registration where, I don't know, step 2 may be something like the user is prompted to add their email and password. Oops. They can confirm those details. So this is pretty standard, but I think we need to also, mention it. But let's actually copy this whole container. We can throw it in there. Oops. There we go. Finally. We can remove that just by pressing delete while clicking it and remove this one. So, and then there probably should be maybe a back button. So I'm going to take this whole container and paste it in. Take this black and I'm going to use the color picker by pressing I and select that blue. So we have a primary and secondary. Maybe this is a skip button or something like that. And I don't know. I'm just trying to cover some bases while I'm also thinking a little bit about wireframing at the very, very simplest and most basic stage. So we have this step. Now, this is where things are going to get interesting because like I said just before this step, you are going to have situations where you have very custom flows that really need to be thought through, and user flows are going to be the best way to do that. So I'm going to increase that frame. Let's think about this third step. Now, step 3, I'm going to jump right in there and I'm going to go right into my details. So the user can add a photo or skip the step. And I think that's fine. So maybe, there's some customization aspect. And we can take this one column image and we can throw this here. And, at this point, you can do a couple different things. I'm going to ungroup it by using Shift Command G, or you could do Shift Control G. Oops. Oh, never mind. This is actually, the frame is actually the piece here. So we can make it smaller and you can start customizing that. And we all know how to use auto layout now. So there's no real need to explain how that works, but you can, mess with the alignment if you need to here. But I'm just going to keep everything centered for the sake of simplicity. Let's get into a little bit more of the custom, the custom stuff that we're going to see in this flow, or at least I think we're going to see. So I think the big part of this app is just customization in general. And we want the user to be able to, add things about themselves. They can, pick, let me think, they can pick interests and hobbies to personalize their shopping experience. So I think this is another thing that we didn't really talk about just yet. When we're thinking about a whole flow here, it's very straightforward. Even though this flow is a little bit longer, I think it is fine because it's one step after the other, just outlining each step, what's skippable, what's not skippable, what are the areas that you can truly manipulate if you need to. So I'm going to take this one column asset and just paste it into here. Oops. I'm going to click into this device, paste it, and I'm going to move it with my arrow keys. And I'm going to just delete this image at the very top. So it kind of acts like a title. I'm going to set this to hug the contents. and I can just bring everything to the top. So say there are like maybe, I don't know, like a bunch of categories that they can click. Here, let me back up there because I don't know if they'll have paragraphs or anything like that. Not that that's important, but I think it's good to try and be, I guess you could say, a little bit truthful in what type of content may actually be there. And the last step, and I think this is going to be it after this step right here, but I'm going to select all these, and you can do that just by dragging your cursor or by clicking shift. So I'm going to do that. I'm holding option shift and I am dragging it, so it's kind of acting like a duplicate. Okay, now this is step 5. So I think step 5, ignore the actual design in there because I don't think that's what it's going to look like. But step 5 should probably be something like, okay, I've picked my hobbies, interests, it's going to personalize my shopping experience. Now I should get some sort of confirmation and I'm done. Like happy, success, that's it. So success, the user has registered for the product and can now access all of the member related features. This is just off the top of my head, but you can kind of see how this does follow the same line of thinking when it comes to just the general way things should flow with a user flow. So I'm just going to paste that in there, and I'm going to once again make everything centered. And there's like my confirmation screen. I know it's not like beautiful or anything, but it definitely gets the point across. And these blue buttons are like, this is what I'm really clicking on. Maybe we can even come in here and, just set one of these, we can set these colors. See, these are the selection colors. So if you click them and you select like say blue, then we're starting to select everything as blue. Then you can go ahead and maybe adjust the opacity here. I mean, you can say that this is clickable and so is this. So color picker while I'm selecting that and just pick the color. And these are a little bit interactive. So you can go ahead and do that across the board if you really want to. Not necessary at all. I mean, I think the details are the most important part, as you can see how I've basically laid out every single step, what can and can't be done, and kept it really, really succinct. And that's how we created our first user flow for registering for a product. Hey everyone, welcome back. We are going to create one more user flow. I think the most important one that I really want to get to is finding the right product through search. Now, this one is a huge one. So we have this one over here, and literally I'm just going to duplicate it. So it's going to duplicate beside it by pressing Command D or Control D, and you can bring that down. That is exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm going to jump right into here, and I'm going to start naming this one. So you can name it anything you want. We could just call it search or something like that. Let's get a little bit more specific with the name. Okay. Finding the right product through search. Now, search is very, very key to a lot of products' success when it comes to like e-commerce or when it comes to, just searching for different types of products, search results for knowledge sharing. When you think about like things like Google, I mean, there's a lot of UX work that goes into that. And I just want to kind of build out that flow a bit. Think about all the different scenarios that are possibilities, and just go through that with you. So you can either just follow along with me, or you can actually start building some design. So I'm just gonna, like I said, I have a duplicate here, so we can just start from that. Now, when I think of search, like where does it start? So step 1, I'm going to start writing some details because it's the way I personally work. You can just start visually. I like to just start from just writing down what I think is like the job to be done here by the user. So when I think about like search, the user is able to begin that search from like the home screen. So begin their search from the home screen. The user can click the search input. Okay, and then we can put together like a quick home screen. We could repurpose this button to be at the very top. Maybe this image is like a header of some sort of like some big, I don't know, product maybe. What else is there? There may be some more products. Let's go to our assets. So I'm going to actually, I'm going to zoom out a bit. I'm going to grab these assets over here and bring them right beside. At least for now. Oops, I'm zooming in and out so much. And here we go. So we have more products. This is like just me quickly building a home screen. Maybe there's some smaller products too. And there we go. That's our search. And okay. So now that we've clicked search, what do we think is going to happen? So we need to think about like every little detail. I mean, step 2, I think the user receives a keyboard prompt. So I'll even go into sometimes like little details like this as to how certain interactions should perform. And you don't need to do this for everything. I like to do it for the most important types of interactions that maybe users really need outlined because they have such high traffic. Not like, okay, the button is clicked and then it hovers and does a spin and then jumps out at you. I don't know. Like those types of micro interactions, I don't think you really need to worry about. I like to do certain things like this where the interaction is more like a multi-step interaction. So an example is, the user receives a keyboard prompt within a search overlay and is able to enter their search. So this is pretty standard as well, I think. Maybe we'll just remove this and we'll start fresh. Like maybe the search is still at the top and maybe there's this massive keyboard prompt that comes from the bottom. And now we can just play with auto layout a bit. Instead of packed, I want them to be separated. So I'm going to go and do space between. So yeah, this kind of does look like a keyboard prompt that comes out, and I'm going to just make it blue as well. This can be like secondary, like you can still click on it in some way, shape, or form, but this is the main interaction that's happening. And then step 3. So now this is what I'm talking about. Like, let's get into the details here. So as the user types, the product gives the user suggestions for potential searches. So think about like type aheads and stuff like that. The user can click on the search item that relates to their intended search. So I'm thinking about a couple different things here, to be honest. I have this screen. I'm actually going to delete this entirely and just duplicate this screen and drag it over, because I think this one's going to actually work well. So this is maybe like secondary now. And what we have is, I don't know, let's think here. Let's steal this. So we have these rectangles, and that's going to be kind of like our list items. So we're going to set it to fill. So there's like some sort of subheading. I'm going to just copy and paste it, Command C or Control C, and the same for adding the paste is Controller Command V. And we have a bunch of different items here. Maybe that's too many, it doesn't really matter. But let's see. And then over here, we'll just make this like blue. So they're going to click on this. Now you can make another flow where they just click, or you can do a branch here. Like instead of clicking the type ahead, they just click enter on the keyboard and then it goes to the same place. Ultimately, I mean, it's basically the same flow, and I'm not sure it's worthwhile to think through that too much. But step 4, I think the user is then presented with many search results. And then this is where you can branch again. Maybe there are no search results. What happens then? How do we get them back to searching? So these are the types of scenarios that you're going to need to think through. And they choose the product they have been looking for. Okay, so I think we can actually reuse some of this stuff over here maybe, or maybe we can use like these types of pieces. So I'm actually going to delete everything that's in this frame. And I'm going to start fresh. So maybe there's like tons of search results. Maybe we still have that search at the very top that's easily accessible. And then we have like maybe our step 5 here, where the user is then like finally in the product page. So the user is now able to review the product that they had searched for and can decide if they want to add the item to their cart. So this is a very important step as well, because this is actually the end, right? Like this is our goal, and we've found the right product through the goal. So what does this screen look like? I mean, I think it's, maybe very similar here, where it's like there is, let's go to our assets. I think we have like, oh, there we go. We can use that. So this looks like kind of like a product page now. And maybe there's like this big add to cart button or something. I don't know. I think it doesn't really matter right now, but this is essentially maybe how the flow plays out. And essentially that is what it is like to create like a user flow for finding the right product through search. So remember, get into those nitty-gritty details. Think about the optional routes users can take, because if you do not, you're going to have a lot of trouble trying to design later for solutions that you should have been thinking about way more earlier in the process. I know we all love to jump right into like creating nice UI designs and whatnot, but take some time to think about some of the more important user flows. Hey everyone, we are back at it again, and today we're going to learn about sitemaps. So before we even get into creating them, we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy and why they're so useful. And yes, they are still useful. So the big question is, people still use sitemaps? Of course they do. It's not just limited to information architecture. Everyone should use sitemaps, especially designers. They help provide structure for your product. Like, look at this. We have the primary navigation, our secondary navigation. We can really plan out all the different navigation schemes within our product. Sitemaps help a lot. So what are they? Sitemaps are hierarchical diagrams of a website or an application that shows how pages are prioritized. I want you to think about the last lesson that we went through. User flows that we did prior are kind of like a street view of what we were discovering in terms of like how the user should achieve goals and where we discovered different types of content we needed. You remember this user flow over here. This is making a purchase. And we discovered a lot of different things. We discovered like the different steps that it took to actually complete a purchase. We discovered different types of micro interactions, all the different close-up details that we didn't necessarily know before. Now, a sitemap is essentially a bird's eye view. This way we can take an early glance of what our product looks like from the treetops. So when do we use sitemaps? Well, sitemaps are generally used in the beginning or really early on in the design process, like right after discovery or kickoffs, right after you get all that information from your clients or from your product team, kind of like what we're doing right now with the application that we're trying to build. They'll really help us when we need to start working on our wireframes. Welcome back. So you may be asking yourself, well, how do I create a sitemap? Well, let's jump in. The first step is anatomy. Let's learn about the anatomy of a sitemap. So essentially, a sitemap will consist of all these linked pages. So we have this as our page. I mean, they don't need to necessarily look like this. Like I said before, with other things, it's all about what works for you, what best represents what you're trying to get across. So right now, I'm just kind of using a little card. I don't necessarily use this when I'm creating a sitemap. So this is the main card. And within the anatomy, you have a reference number. Some people like to use reference numbers. They really kind of help when you're like creating actual wireframes afterwards. You can use that same reference number. You don't necessarily need to. I know a lot of people that like to, but it's a preference. But one thing that is definitely needed is a label. So this label over here is definitely going to be needed because it'll let us understand what the page name is. That is what we really want to know. So what you want to do is you want to start with your homepage always. The rows that follow afterwards are by the highest priority. So I say rows because typically people, when they build a sitemap, they're building it from the top to the bottom. You can build it from left to right. Like I said before, it's all preference. So I'm going left to right now. So the next step of the sitemap would be like your primary, secondary, and tertiary pages and so on. So right now we have a primary page. So if we were to think about our current client, we have our home page and you could access a category on that page and that would be our primary level. And then afterwards, you may be able to select a subcategory and that would be our secondary level. And it could go on and on. I wouldn't advise doing that, but you get the gist. So this is our primary and our secondary, and this is ground zero. Now you could use a legend if you'd like. It's totally up to you. That's another preference. If you're sharing it with a lot of people, it may help if you have a lot of symbols in there. If you have colors, I like to use colors because it helps to signify whether like a page is public or a member only. So totally up to you. If it really helps to get through what you're trying to say with your product and your sitemap, use a legend. So there are two types of sitemaps. This is a flat sitemap. And this is better suited for smaller to medium-sized products. I'm thinking maybe like 10 to 100 pages, maybe even less, to be honest. There are 4 or less vertical levels. You'll notice that there's only 2 vertical levels here, and that's probably what we'll be using when we create our sitemap. But there are 4 less vertical levels, and they all help enhance the discoverability of content because there are fewer levels to click through. So you want to use this for smaller products. You don't want people to be going too deep unless it's absolutely necessary. The next type of sitemap is a deep sitemap. So these are better suited for larger size sites, and they help house a lot of information. So we're talking like hundreds and hundreds of pages. We're talking maybe pages for like a government website, maybe like a huge e-commerce website. They can get around to 5 vertical levels, which is huge. I mean, we're at 4 here, and you can imagine the amount of pages that you can get into. This ultimately makes it harder to discover content, so you'll need to think about the different ways for users to get to places like menu shortcuts. But yeah, so deep sitemaps, use them for larger products. Don't use them for a product like we're building. So why are they so valuable? Well, they help you plan for usability, and it provides a full overview, which can really help teams simplify and trim unnecessary pages. But really, when you build a sitemap, you can also strategically place content where users can find it. It results in the creation of navigation, hierarchies, and categorizations of your product. You get a good understanding of your navigation, you can calculate the amount of content you need, and it gives you a good understanding of your scope. So sitemaps are incredibly useful. You may not create like a final sitemap, and that shouldn't bottleneck you in terms of starting wireframes or even like sketching and user flows, but you should really start one to get a sense of what your entire navigation scheme is going to look like. Let's jump right into Figma and let's start building our own.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are going to be talking about sitemaps today. Before we begin this tutorial though, I want to show you what exactly we are going to learn within Figma and what we're going to build. So we're going to learn a bunch of different things. We're going to learn how to build these types of assets for our sitemap that are going to be reusable for you in the future and today. And we're going to make non-component versions, and we're going to learn how to use components. And that's going to be super fun. Trust me, it's going to make your workflow and your life just so much more easier. Then we're actually going to build our own sitemap as well. So you're going to need a couple of things before we can actually start building. You're going to need, obviously, you're going to need Figma, but you're going to need the Autoflow plugin. So if I go into my plugins just by right-clicking, this is what Autoflow looks like. And if I were to make a rectangle, it basically allows you to connect one layer to the next, kind of like how we're seeing here. We're going to be using that a lot. So if you haven't used this plugin yet, definitely get it before we start. Okay, let's get started. Hey everyone, and welcome back. I am going to teach you how to create these assets that I've used for our sitemap. Now, these are some great assets. I'm just going to run through them really quickly to explain why we have a bunch of different colors and what they mean and what this container is over here. So these aren't actually going to be components. We are just making some reusable pieces here. If you're not comfortable with components yet, that's totally fine. We don't have to jump into that just yet, but I will teach that. Now, I have decided to show the sitemap in a couple of different ways. Now we have a page, and I'm going to break it into pages and the links that are available within that page. We have public links, and that means links that anyone can see, even if you are not signed in or registered. We also have member-only links. Those are links for people who are specifically registered with our product. We have more specific links for logging in, signing up, logging out, that kind of stuff. And we have yellow to indicate the outside links that are going to push you outside of the app or product. Ultimately, you may not use all of these. You may use this for future projects. I think it's just great to have them like just ready, but I'm going to get into how to build these. And this is the container over here on the right side that is going to house all of these items. So let's jump right in. So actually, I'm going to just take one of these just to show you what it looks like. So this is essentially just a frame if we break it down. So we can build it together. So what I'm going to do is just use a text layer like I've just done. I press T, and the easiest way to do that is just press T, click, and you have your text layer ready. So if I write, say something like link, and then after I wrap this within a auto layout frame, so I'm going to right click on it, add auto layout. So now I have my link frame. There we go. You can't actually see anything right now because there's no fill. But if we were to say press I to get the color picker and use the color picker on this little link over here, we can easily just copy that. So that's all I basically did. You can choose whatever style you like. I'm going to actually stretch this out a bit, and I am going to add a border radius to this. So I have a 4 pixel border radius. I'm also going to make this a tad taller. So I like using fixed heights on things like this. It really depends on if it's going to run to 2 lines. It may be wise not to for something like this, though. Like a button makes sense to use like a fixed height, but something that may run onto 2 lines, I don't really like to take the chance because then it'll look kind of awkward. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So I'm actually going to keep this pretty simple. We'll make a copy. I'm going to just, duplicate that to the side, and we'll show you what that looks like when you have a fixed height and 2 lines. But so let's jump right in here. So we have the link, we have the auto layout frame. We don't need spacing between items. We can just keep it pretty simple, 16 pixel spacing there and maybe 16 up top, and we will add a stroke. So I'm just going to press the little plus icon here, and there we go. We got our stroke. Now for the stroke, what I did was I just grabbed the color and I basically went down. Don't make it too dark, don't make it too light. It just looks like it's kind of like, just a little bit darker version there. And you can adjust the width, and basically there you go. You could also adjust like opacity if you want of like the link. So the text here, I'm just going to adjust the opacity as 75%, and that is essentially the link. Now let's actually remove this one and make a copy from this since we have it already ready. So if we had 2 sentences that are on 2 different lines, this is a very long link. So if we have a very long link and we set that to fill the container and we shrink it, the actual auto layout container grows. But if we were to set, say, a fixed height and then copied that text over here, make sure it's set to fill container, then we have this issue where this is a fixed height and it's not going to grow with this anymore. So definitely make sure that if things are going to go to a second line, you don't have it set to a fixed height. So that's essentially how you create these individual links. So you can just give them different colors. I like to do that personally. When it comes to the actual page container though, this one's a little bit more trickier. Let's take a look at how it's built. So first off, I'm going to take that right out. So you can basically Command C or Control C, and you could just drag it out of there. Command V, it's going to paste it underneath there, but you can, take it out. So I have my links actually set up in a auto layout container. So, and they only have a spacing of 8 pixels. And within that container are my links. Then I have another layer that's right here. So that is just like my page title. Really simple stuff. Now this is the part that is a bit difficult. All I've done here, if we take a look at it, is create another auto layout container with these traffic lights. So these are just circles in a group. We have green, yellow, and red. Basically, it is literally just grabbing the ellipse tool, which is O, making a copy. Oops. And just to mimic like a top of a browser. So really simple stuff. Then you can group it. And then we would frame it again into like an auto layout frame and call it our header. I know I am moving a little quickly here, but I do just want to give you a good understanding. I'm going to grab the color picker with I and click on this just to get the color. And that's basically it. I mean, that's all there really is to mimicking this header. Once we have that header, we can take the rest of our content. We're going to take everything, and you guessed it, if I press Shift A, it's going to throw it in auto layout frame, and now we have our frame here. And now we can do a bunch of different things. First of all, I'm actually going to set the fill to white. I am going to also add a stroke like I have here. That stroke will be, say, 2 pixels, and I want it to match the color that I have for the header. Another thing I want to do is I want to ensure that this has a nice border radius, so I'm just going to slap something quick on there, and then it's going to clip the content, because you notice I put the border radius, but it didn't really apply to the header. That's because the header background is bleeding off of the frame, and we haven't clipped it. So now that we clip it, it's hidden. Now we have the issue of these things. Now you can't just set the padding within, because if I were to do that, it would also create padding for here. So the best way to handle something like this is to actually wrap these two into their own container. So I'm going to use Shift A and set this new container within here to fill. And then I'm going to select all the contents within. You can see my layer is opening up here. I'm going to select them all. You can use Control A or Command A and set them all to fill the container. So now that we have everything fill in the container, we can actually set the different padding and spacing between things. So 16 pixels, I'm going to just have like that as the padding here. And I'm going to set 16 pixels here and 16 pixels at the bottom and the top. And then you can go into your frame, finally, your top level page container. Mine has the name of frame 1, I think it is. And you can remove the padding if you need to. And that's basically all there really is to creating this new page container. Now, the only thing here I have to fix is the header and set that to fill container. And there you have it. You can create your very own version of this pretty quickly. And I would say, if you have some time, you can put your own personal spin on it. But that's how you create your own like reusable little asset for sitemaps. Hey everyone, and welcome back. I want to talk about components, basic components. We're not getting into really deep details on how to use like components super properly. I just want you to increase your efficiency, make you also feel like you can build better components in the future, but let's start here. So we have these reusable assets. The only problem is that you're just going to need to copy and paste them over and over again, and maybe it's not super efficient. It's still efficient. It's definitely better than nothing. 100%. Big improvement. But if we turn these into components, they would be so much better. So let's jump right in. Really, the only difference I would say between this and a component is you'll be able to access it in your assets table over here. So let's jump in. So these are our current link components. So I'm going to copy them with a Command C or Control C and paste it. I'm going to drag them right out. So these are our links. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to deselect the group, ungroup them. So for me, it's Shift Command G. You can even go into our right click. It's going to be Shift Control G for Windows users. So now that we have all of our components that we want to build, we can do a couple different things. Now we can either just create a component like this, or using the shortcut, we can create individual components, or we can select all of them. So if I'm going to go back in time and undo that, we can select all of them. So we can create multiple components, and now I can access all those components right here whenever I want. Just drag and drop them into whatever field I need, and so on. So these are components, and they're not really, you can edit them, but they're going to be reusable, and you won't be able to necessarily do much in terms of touching this master component. So there's two things here. We have our master component, and then we have what we call an instance, and these are copies of the master. So whatever you do to the instance will not affect the master. Whatever you do to the master, though, will affect the instance, as you can tell. If I select all of these and I say change the border radius to 100, that's going to change everywhere. Now, the great thing about instances is that you can swap them pretty quickly. So if I go into here and I select member only, this is where our instances are, I can go and select outside link. So if I want to switch something really quickly on the fly, I can do that. But I'm going to just go back quickly and fix that. So now that we have these components, we can do a couple of things. We can either leave them as is, or we can actually go the route of using something that I like to call a variants. And variants are very powerful. So if we select them all, since they're all very similar, the reason why you would do this is because you have a similar component to the other similar master component. So an example is primary and secondary buttons, or different states like hover states versus active states. And when you're thinking about things like inputs and forms. Now, for our little links here, the only difference really is color. It's the color and the type. The differentiator is essentially the color, but the type is public, member only, login, or sign up, and outside link. So if we select all our components, we can click over here, combine them as variants. That's going to put them in this little box. And inside this box, now we have the link version, we have the member only version, and we have the login or sign up version and the outside link version. If we click this bounding box around our variants, we can go in here and specify a couple of things. So they're called properties, and those are the differences between the components. So we're going to say that our property type here is the type of link, or link type. You can go deeper. You can have so many different types of properties. You can have icons and so on and so forth. It can get really advanced. But for this, we're just going to keep it super simple. So we have 4 variants. Now, if I were to say, take a copy, or I have them here now. So it's in my assets panel over here. Now, if you were to take a copy and now go here, you can select member only. It looks a little different. This is going to be great for more complex components. So that's how you create a component, and that's how you start to use variants. The next step I want to talk about is actually creating a component for this over here. So I'm just going to drag a copy over. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this public link, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to select in my layers the links container that is housing all of these versions. And I'm going to paste it. There it is. You can see it's outlined in purple. You can see that layer. I'm going to just shift it right to the top. And I'm going to take the rest of the links, select them all here, so I can select them in my layer panel too and delete them. Then I'm going to take this link and I'm going to copy it and paste it. I'm just going to make sure that's dragged right back into this layer, because sometimes when you copy and paste and there's only one layer within, it'll paste right outside. So we can copy and paste it again and again and again and again and again and again. I know that's kind of crazy, but just stick with me. I promise it's going to get better. So what I'm going to do is, now that I have this set up with a bunch of different links, I'm going to turn it into a component. And that's it. And you may be thinking, what are we doing here now? Like, we have a bunch of links. So the great thing about components is you can't add to an instance. So you can't necessarily say, okay, now I want, this another public link in here. It doesn't work that way. Once an instance has been created, you can't add to it. But you can hide what you have added. So if you make a very long list, you can take whatever you don't need and press, like, say, delete, and it's just going to hide them in that panel. Then you can go in here and, start specifying what you want. Oh, I want it to be this one, an outside link, and this one, a member-only link, and this one, a login or sign-up link, and so on and so forth. And you never know how many links you're going to have on one page, so it's great to just, prepare for the absolute worst and throw them in there. And now you can just, either grab links or just, grab this every time you need a new page and just keep on going, and then, link them together. And now you have these components that are reusable. Now you may be thinking, oh my goodness, like, why are we doing all this? Like, it just seems so excessive. Well, maybe for sitemaps, but this is a great way to demonstrate how useful they can be. And if I really wanted to, change things, you can start to tell why they're so powerful for things like user interfaces, because sometimes you make one change on a button because maybe you don't like rounded buttons anymore and you want, like, flat buttons with, like, strong, sharp corners. You're going to have to go through all your designs and find all those buttons. Now, if you were using components, you would switch one and, it will be modified everywhere else. If I wanted to, switch here and say that this no longer has, like, a rounded corner, like I did over here, and it put the border radius to 0, that's going to reflect everywhere. So that's how you use components to create some pretty awesome reusable assets that you can use within your local file. Remember that if you have a free starter plan, this is the only way to use components. You cannot use components across multiple files. You can only use them within the file that you're working in.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are going to be jumping right into creating our very own sitemap. Now, we are going to start with the home screen and work our way out. We'll do what I call the top layer, or the login and registration stuff, onboarding, some of that kind of stuff, and then we'll get into some of the main pages. Now, I'm going to be using my component that I created. You can use it too. The assets are there for you. And if you have any sketches, like when we actually did the sketching section, or if you have any user flows, bring those in here, because they're going to really help you understand where you need to go and what you need to do. So let's jump right in. So I have the home screen over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with search. I know this isn't necessarily like a public link or anything, but it's actually a very important part of the flow. And then I'm going to go with a member only link. So I think there's probably going to be some sort of like shopping interests section or something like that. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that for now, because I'm not sure what it's going to be called just yet. And then we probably have a way to get to categories and deals. Now, one of the big things that I think you should know is that it's just going to come naturally to you when you are actually building your own sitemap and you're starting to work through the project a bit more, depending on what exactly you're building. It's going to be something that you're going to start getting, more and more comfortable with in terms of like the subject matter. So we're going to have a couple more member only links. Okay, so we have a wish list. Maybe we'll have orders as well. And it seems like the other option is something like profile. We'll probably have cart. Now, I'm not sure what exactly is going to be part of the main navigation just yet. And that's something I'm going to figure out more and more with, as we refine sitemaps and as we just move forward into the wireframing stage. So what do we have here? Probably a login or sign up. Oops. Let's install that on next launch. And here we go. Okay, so this looks like the great place to start with home. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to think about registration. I think that's fairly important, and we'll start building out that portion. So I'm going to actually make a couple of copies because I'm going to use a bunch of these. So I'm just making a bunch and I'm leaving them here because I'll grab those in a sec. Okay, let's take a look. So we probably have like an introductory screen that I think makes sense. Something like you come in, there's a tutorial maybe, or there's like, either sign up or log in. That seems like something that's really logical for a mobile app. So let's take all these, and what we're going to do is we're just going to press delete, and you can actually delete them and they'll hide because it is a component. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to create two different sections, one for login and one for sign up. So I'll call the sign up just sign up. So delete the rest of the text there. And for login, we'll delete the text there. I'll probably steal this one. That makes sense. Okay, so, and then I'm going to just make another one of these for login as well. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you have everything laid out to the best of your abilities. So from the login screen, it makes sense that you'd be able to go to like some sort of registration and onboarding. And then from there, you'll probably be able to go to login and then go to the home, because we're not necessarily going to force people to sign up. And that's the right approach I think we should take. So I'm just going to link these together. Now I'm going to run my plugin. Where are you? Autoflow. So I got my Autoflow plugin going. Definitely download this plugin if you don't have it. So when I think about the introductory screen, I think that, okay, from the home, I'm just gonna, hold down shift when I clicked that little layer and then connected it to home. I'll show you again in a second. So if I click login, so I'm gonna click this link layer over here, and I'm gonna hold shift and then click this whole container. And just like that, we've created our connections. And some of them are, I would say, you don't necessarily need to do it, but you can fill that in. I mean, I think it's more so useful when you have like the main navigation going somewhere. And yeah, that's basically the first step. Like, just get these normal screens, I would call them, out of the way. And then we're going to move into some screens outlining just the main architecture of it all. Hey everyone, and welcome back. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to start building out some of these different screens that are going to house like things like shopping interests, categories, deals, etc. So let's jump right in. So I'm just going to close my plugin because I'm not going to need it just yet. And I am going to zoom out. Okay. Now I think what makes sense is to start just maybe, I don't know, we can pick a couple, but I'm going to start with shopping interests. So I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to name it. Now you can just follow along with me, or you can go ahead and, do your own thing. If you feel like you have enough of what you need to actually just get started, I think you should at this point, but this will be just something that you can watch just to see how I'm going through that process. So when it comes to the shopping interests and habits, this is definitely going to be a members only section. So I'm going to just make a big note here what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a login and sign up. So like to somehow prompt us that, okay, hey, you need to absolutely sign up to go any further. So kind of like a paywall. Over here, what we're going to do is make all these member only links, and then we can probably hide the rest. I think 4 is going to be enough, because what I have in store for this, I'm thinking that this is where, you know, you can discover new products and maybe a way to see just like your general interests and maybe a way to update them. And then you have categories. So you can have a bunch of different types of, you know, categories for the interests. And then you have maybe some deals, maybe. So, I mean, this definitely can work. So deals may be specific to your shopping interests. So I think that will probably suffice for shopping interests. I'm going to move into over here. I'm going to just do categories. And let's see. Oops. There we go. So we have categories. And I'm just going to keep these very, very open. They're going to be all public links. So we have maybe some like trending items or like trending categories. I'm going to leave that. And then we probably have like categories for specific like events, like whether that's something like, oh, it's Mother's Day or something like that, or it's a holiday. This is what you can get for your partner maybe, or your friend. I think there's definitely a lot of stuff we can do with that, which will be really interesting. And then probably I like to say that maybe every page that's like in relation to products will probably have some sort of like deals section, just because we want to push people to stay within the app. And deals are probably one of the best ways to do it, serving up like really good content like that. So, I mean, I'm on the topic right now, so let's think about deals. So deals, we probably have like trending. Oops. I know Amazon does stuff, and other larger retailers kind of do this stuff where they have like these types of like, lightning deals or like giveaways or something like that. Maybe there is a section for like giveaways. I don't know. I think that's something we should maybe explore. And then we have like maybe deals based off of categories. I mean, that seems like just like a common pattern I've seen on e-commerce sites. And oops, you know what? Maybe we do have a member only type of link here, where it's like the content is more so around deals like just for you. I think that makes sense. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for the first half here. When we get back into our next video, we are going to work on the other half of some of these links over here. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are going to be jumping into the other half of this sitemap over here. So we are digging deeper into some of the finer details. And one thing I really want to point out right now, just before we jump right in, because we are going to get lost in there and just, go through the weeds of, building out those page containers and whatever content is within them. But I think another thing to really stress here is like a sitemap is so good for developing a content strategy. It is so good. Like you can already see that the types of content links that I'm trying to push through each page can make some like really interesting designs, really interesting experiences for users. So definitely go through this exercise, even if you're going to do it on a very lightweight scale. I mean, this is very lightweight. I don't like to spend too much time here, but this lets me think about everything from like a bird's eye view, and then I can make some of those bigger decisions little by little when it comes to the types of content that's going to be on each page, and maybe some pages that I really do want to prioritize. So let's jump right in. So I still have a bunch of my duplicates over here. I'm just going to drag them over. So, okay. I think maybe like the next thing that makes sense right here is, I want to actually talk about the cart. We can work our way up now. So the cart is going to be pretty simple. Let me move these out of the way. They're a bit of a distraction. So with the cart, definitely, I think there's going to be a section here where it's like, if you're not logged in, but you have stuff in your cart, you should probably, log in. So I'm going to just put in a login and sign up section there. Here, you should be able to, go to the items in your cart. So you can probably go to an item listing or something like that, product page. And then you should probably see maybe some similar items. I'm not sure how wise that is, because at this point, we really want people to convert and actually check out. So I'm going to keep this one really simple. Maybe we'll have a big CTA to place your order. Yeah, actually, you know what? Let's actually do this. We'll have one right here that says place order. Okay, and so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the profile page. So that's next. Now we're going to have a bunch of member only links. So I'm going to just make maybe 5, 4 or 5, just to cover all my bases, and close those ones off. Okay, so when I think about the profile page, this doesn't need to be something that's super crazy. I think, there should be some account settings here. Definitely some way to maybe, see your interests and get to that section. Maybe this profile is a bit more involved, is what I'm trying to get at. Customer service, maybe a help center. I think that's a pretty cool option. And then I think maybe your orders, a way to see what you've done in the past. And I think that's it. So, this isn't a really big task that I'm working on right now. I think ultimately, we're keeping it really simple. So I have orders here now. For orders, this one's a little bit more, I think we need to think through it a bit. So we have probably a search and filter. People could have many orders, so we need to account for that. Way for people to filter through. Probably the most important thing is the orders that are in progress. So I'll just throw that in there. Then we have past orders. And then finally, we have a help section. Beautiful. So, I think that's what comprises of an order screen. Search, definitely in progress. We definitely need to see all our orders and maybe a way to contact somebody if something's gone wrong. Maybe that's something that's an FAQ section. I'm not entirely sure just yet. And then the final screen that we're going to work on is wish lists. Okay, so with wish lists, this one is pretty simple as well. So you probably have your saved items, and then you probably have a way to go to those items. That's why I'm putting saved items. And then we have maybe some sharing options. Maybe you can share a list with somebody. When I think about maybe my partner and I are buying gifts for people, or we're trying to buy gifts for our kids and we have lists for each individual kid. I don't know. Maybe there's something like that in terms of a workflow or a user flow. So maybe sharing options and what that looks like and how you link out and support, internal third-party linking. I don't know. Maybe some social media stuff. And then we have similar items. I think this one's a really interesting one. Just trying to get people back into the funnel of adding stuff. And I think that pretty much details what I think is a pretty good sitemap. We could go into search and talk about what does it look like when you click search? You have an overlay, but we're getting more into the nitty gritty of, maybe search results. Search goes to search results or something. Maybe I can add one like that, but there's not much to really add there. And I think that is pretty much it for our sitemap. Great job, everyone. Let's take a look. So we can go ahead now and actually link them all. So I'm going to delete this. We're not going to need it. And I'm going to select everything, bring them down.
and then we can link them. So shopping, let's get our plugin first. I actually really love this part. I know it sounds a bit childish, but it's fun to just like see everything come together. And that's perfect. We have wish lists. Then we're gonna have orders and profile, and then add cart. I don't think it's useful to maybe bring login up here. I mean, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. One thing I do want to note though, I mean, we can even go deeper than this. Like this probably isn't totally complete, and that's fine. But like there are sections in here where like we haven't even mentioned like the product page. We haven't even mentioned certain things like, you know, deeper within like a category page. So there's a lot of different things that we are, you know, not looking into. It's going to take a lot of time, but I very much urge everyone to kind of keep on going deeper until you feel like it's enough. And that is how we create a sitemap in Figma.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. I want to give you some very quick tips on how to build great sitemaps and not get stuck in the process. This may seem overwhelming, but it is really easy to pull off. So one of the big tips I always give people is don't think about two things at one time. If you're working on a sitemap, you know, you don't want to start thinking about where to put things while you're also thinking about what things to put. Keep it simple. Focus on one thing at a time and you'll make way more thoughtful decisions. So when we were thinking about some of these types of pages, like, yeah, it's great to start thinking of this content strategy. I love to, but we're not going that deep just yet. We're touching the first layer, and then, you know, we're digging deeper and deeper gradually. The second tip I'd like to give is to bring in your user flows. Now, your user flows should indicate the types of pages you need and where they may fit within the structure of your app. So I mentioned, you know, search not necessarily being an actual like link, but this user flow is something that we already had thought of. We know that there's some sort of like intermittent overlay where they're searching and then they go to the search results and then they get to the page. So we already had an understanding of that model and that flow. So definitely use your user flows and your sketches. Now, speaking about sketching, tools. Now you can definitely start with sketching, but once you start to revise, move it over into an online tool like Figma. It's great to see like, you know, those structure maps that you can build, but ultimately this is where you're going to refine everything and move forward. I think another thing that people don't think about is colors. I mean, you don't need to go crazy with colors. Just because it's a sitemap, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have colors. I like to use colors to highlight things like screens that are maybe visible to certain users, like we have here with member-only links and public links. It also makes your sitemap much easier to just remember instead of thinking of it as like a black and white set of cards. That's super boring. And I think the last thing, and this is it, don't aim for perfection. Things are going to change. You just want to set yourself up for success and give yourself the best chance possible to succeed. You're never going to get it perfect. I've seen things like this thrown out later in the process when there's like some sort of large product pivot. I need you to remember that once you have a good idea of what your product structure is going to look like, move on to your wireframes, dig deeper, and test some of those assumptions that you're making here, because these are a lot of assumptions. This is just giving us a nice little bit of a plan to move forward. Your sitemap's not going to answer all the questions, but it will give you that starting point for your wireframes. So remember, be lean,